The Sun Devils will have a lot of proving to do in their first year in the Big 12, but thankfully they'll have a good friend with the Houston Cougars.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs are done. The sports are not sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back in. Today, we are going to be doing a very special crossover episode with Parker Ainsworth of the Locked On Cougars, Locked On Coogs, YouTube page and podcast for the Houston Cougars. And me and Parker have a really fun conversation. We kind of break down what I've been meaning to get to about ASU's move over to the Big 12, my thoughts on the new atmosphere and the commissioner's promises to be proactive in trying to add new schools. We talk about Houston and ASU and how they're pegged to finish towards the bottom of the Big 12, but the reason why the two of them might be able to surprise some people. Obviously, Arizona State is a much more talented team than anybody is willing to let on, but I might have been able to open my third eye about Houston after the conversation that me and Parker had. This is a fun little crossover episode, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to that right now. I'll see you there. Remember, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.
The Big 12 is going to look a whole lot different this year. How different? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On Cougs and Locked On Sun Devils. I'm one of your hosts, Parker Ainsworth, joined by Richie Bradshaw. We appreciate you making us your first listen of the day today, whichever one you're listening to, I guess I should say. We appreciate making us your first listen. Richie, for folks who are trying to join the conversation at home, I got to ask, when you're in Vegas, because we're going to talk about your trip to Vegas, when you're in Vegas and you're at the table, you got red or black, which one do you put your chips on?
I feel like it's typically just all in on black.
Like, just let it go. Let it roll.
for whatever reason, there's like oh my God, there's a saying that my buddy has where it's just like always bet on black. That's what it is. So yeah, if we're looking for something to jumpstart us real quick, find a table, $20, put $20 down, put it on black. Black hits, $40. If not, you're out 20.
Well, yeah, I mean, $40 all of a sudden you can have a little bit more fun that night, right? Richie, you were in Las Vegas for Big 12 Media Days. First of all, welcome to the Big 12. That's quite an opening and entrance. Last year, so as a new host to the Big 12 last year, I went to the one in Dallas. Dallas is not Las Vegas, so I got a little bit of a bone to pick there. But talk to me about, I guess, at Big 12 Media Days, you got to hear Yormark speak. We can pull up quotes and things, but what stuck out to you about Brett?
He is very impressive. First of all, just the aura he gives off. He was walking around and like shaking hands and meeting everybody from the media crew, like not just the higher ups and everything, like people like me and other beat reporters and everything. And he was walking around, he was shaking hands and everything. I did not get the chance to because I had to pull my attention elsewhere, but he was very close to me. Just the aura he gives off, very impressive, very confident. And then he gets onto the stage and he talks, and it's like, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy knows how to command the room and the attention and the respect of everybody. He obviously talks about the Big 12 being open for business and continuing to add new schools. You hear the rumors about Clemson and Florida State. Like, this is somebody that, unlike George Kliavkoff from the Pac-12 where ASU is coming, this is someone who is very competent and good at his job. Very good thing to see. A sight for sore eyes.
Saying he's sorry, I don't mean to talk about saying he's very confident and good, and that's the difference was well put. All right, so you're at Big 12 Media Days. Brett Yormark says, like you said, open for business. He makes some hints at the idea of like private equity is on the table and different like allusions to things. And then a big Dellinger piece hits right afterwards about like, is that private equity connecting dots to ultimately adding a Florida State or a Clemson? And for folks at home that maybe didn't read the piece, it basically connects the dots that like private equity be an influx of cash. Cash could help resolve those lawsuits. Those lawsuits get them out of the conferences. Sounds like the SEC and Big Ten aren't really open for business like the Big 12 is. If so facto, new landing spot, right? As someone who just got here, you hear all this constant rumor and chatter about the expansion. I have my own thoughts too, but you just got here. What's that like for you? I mean, you just left a conference.
I think it's really cool. And there is an aspect of it that's, upsetting for the longtime college fans, because I think one of the things that we all loved about college football was the regions that you had and creating the rivalries that way. But the other, the other really nice thing for ASU is you're still kind of within your region outside of like Cincinnati and Orlando. When you play Central Florida on the road, you're still really central to like the Texas and Oklahomas. Colorado is still there. Like, you're still having that regionality for yourself. So it's not like, Cal and Stanford going to the ACC, which that's a whole other bag of worms, but or can of worms. This is really exciting for ASU to be making that move. You still have the region aspect of it. There's rivalries that are starting to be established. This will be the third year you are playing Oklahoma State. I know that there's some bitter feelings towards some of the other teams, like Texas Tech in the Big 12. There's a lot of excitement in Tempe right now for the move to the Big 12.
Well, and it's interesting because Houston has wanted to be in the Big 12 for a long time, right? Houston gets left out in 95, and the conference grows and grows and grows. Houston's kind of left behind when the Southwest Conference falls apart. And now that Houston's here, it's a very natural fit with a lot of, regionality. You mentioned the Texas schools, the Oklahoma schools, the Kansas schools, Colorado coming back in the fold. When Arizona State gets the call like, hey, the Pac-12 is falling apart, you're jumping over the Big 12 now. It's not as natural, right? Is that a weird call, or were you just happy to get a call?
It was weird because ASU's been in the Pac-12 for far longer than I've been alive. They've been entrenched in West Coast forever because they were in the WAC before that. It's a very big change of scenery, but it's also a very welcome change of scenery. This is a program that is looking to get back to the consistent 8 to 10 win seasons that they had about 10 years ago under Todd Graham. This is a program that, while they don't contend for national championships, they contend for a bowl game every year, and that's not been the case recently. ASU is starving to get back into that realm of possibilities for the program, and this is a huge opportunity for them to be able to capitalize on that. So it's also a really big deal from the sense of opening up doors for recruiting in Texas. ASU's got the movement hashtag Texas to Tempe, and they're creating that pipeline of trying to get the talent from Texas, which, as you and I both know, is probably the best place in the country to go get high school talent. They're doing everything that they can to be able to get this program back on track. And one of the best ways you can do that is to go to a conference that has an established, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, the Big 12 has a brand. I don't know
Yes.
what Arizona State folks would think of the brand as opposed to Houston folks. And it's interesting that it still feels Texas-centric after losing A&M, whatever that is, 10, 12 years ago, and Texas this past year. But you mentioned like schools like yourself coming in from a football standpoint and pulling kids out. Does Arizona then, as Arizona and Arizona State, it's the state of Arizona, get kind of a lot of West Coast, and does it get kind of both ends of that now all of a sudden because you're kind of located exactly in between the two?
Oh, it definitely does. And Arizona State has been a program that has recruited Southern California very, very well over the last several years. They still have that pipeline established, even with a new head coach in Kenny Dillingham, who's going into his second year. You still have a pipeline established to Southern California. You are recruiting in your own backyard. There's a lot of very talented kids in the state of Arizona. You have recruited Texas before. It's only going to get better now that you are actually in Texas. This is a really good opportunity for Arizona State to continue building their brand of football and also opening up new possibilities for them in the world of recruiting.
Well, and recruiting is the lifeline of college football, and this is not exclusively a football conference. Mark does a great job, I think, of talking about how this is the best conference in college basketball as well, right? Arizona State, like again, Houston folks will think of like James Harden coming down, like that, like that'll be kind of the first thing to mind for a lot of folks. But it's had kind of some up and down history in basketball. Have you even thought about it, or is it just too far away at this point, the idea of joining that basketball conference as well?
Oh, no, I definitely have. And ASU's upcoming recruiting class is the best they've ever had. They have 2 5-star kids, Josan Sainon as a point guard and a power forward with Jaden Quaintance, who was, I believe, the number 4 recruit in the entire country. These two are going to be coming to the program to establish a new era of Sun Devils basketball. They're hopefully going to help the program really get back on track with recruiting too and everything. But this was the need and the push you needed to go to a conference that has Houston, that has Kansas, Arizona, Baylor. Typically, more often than not, is a really good basketball program. There's a lot of really good basketball programs that are in the Big 12 programs that I'm not thinking off the top of my head. Like, this is a very good conference for college basketball. ASU hasn't been the best, but hopefully they're going to be able to turn a corner with the recruiting. Bobby Hurley is a good recruiter. It's just a matter of getting it onto the court and establishing it. But hopefully, in theory, it should be really difficult to not get the most out of 2 5-stars.
Well, so that's the Big 12 bump in a lot of ways too, right? They want to come play against the Kansases and the Houstons and the so-ons, obviously. I'm not silly. I know football makes this whole thing go round. I don't mean to like skirt past that straight to basketball season. Obviously, as a Houston show, we're a little excited about basketball season. We've got reason to be optimistic about football too, as do the Arizona State Sun Devils as they enter, I guess, your first year in the conference, second year with a new head coach. Houston's second year in the conference, first year the new head coach. I want to kind of talk about what that landscape looks like. First, I want to make sure we encourage folks to head over to FanDuel because we love sports. You love sports, and I never really want them to stop. The summertime, we're kind of at the All-Star break in Major League Baseball. You've got the Olympics coming up. WNBA is always happening, and there's always ways to get in on the action at FanDuel in the summer. FanDuel is hooking it up with customers can get a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. I guess you're probably a Diamondbacks guy, Richie, and I actually don't know the Diamondbacks odds off the top of my head. But it does look like the Astros are creeping up. They're still not quite the favorite in the AL West. They're at plus 120. The Mariners had a big lead to start the year. I've been telling listeners all year long that shrinking. The Diamondbacks look like a little bit further at the NL West at plus 3,000. That's just, I think, a function of the way that the divisions are set up. But if you think there's anything, any sport, anything you want to get your eyes on, baseball stuff, basketball stuff, Olympic stuff, the FanDuel.com has it for you. So head over to FanDuel.com for making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so FanDuel is great. I got one beef, and that's they got Houston's over-under set at 3.5, and Arizona State you've got set at 4.5. Talk to us. Year one in the conference, year two under Kenny Dillingham. What's the thought there? 4.5.
This is a team that's going to have its eyes set on bowling this year. Last year, ASU had a self-imposed bowl ban as part of the ongoing or now concluded NCAA investigation for recruiting violations during COVID. They were a 3-win team last year. They easily could have been a 4-win team last year. There was 4 games that were toss-ups that ASU very easily could have won. So you're talking about a 7-5 season. This is not an easy schedule for Arizona State in their first year going into the Big 12. Texas Tech, Kansas, Utah, UCF, Oklahoma State, K-State, Arizona are the games that stand out to me. It's a very tough slate for ASU. They've also got to take on Mississippi State and Texas State in non-conference games. But this is a team that you would hope in year 2 will have learned how to win games. And you will take those close games. You will take those games where you were really tight against a Cal or a Washington. They almost beat Washington last year. I don't know if a lot of people remember that. They were a really bad pass interference away and a healthy offensive line away from being able to kick field goals and win that football game. But you're hoping that they're going to find a way to be able to win those games this year. You were able to be more aware of how to finish those games. This is a talented Arizona State team. It's just not. It's not a team that we're expecting to be a conference contender or anything like that. But there's definitely expectations to be able to go bowling this year. At a minimum, we want to be right there. You had 3 wins the last 2 years, 4.5 year over under. If you can hit the over, you're happy, but you definitely want to be able to go to a bowl game this year.
I kind of feel similar about Houston. I think Houston's deal is 3.5 is very low. New coach with any coaching change, a lot of talent left to go get to more stable situations or just somewhere they were more familiar with or whatever. And a couple key pieces did leave. But you're returning a starting quarterback. I think they made an improvement as a head coach. And the big deal here is Houston's schedule is brutal. I don't know how you feel about Arizona State's, but Houston's non-conference are UNLV, Oklahoma, and then Rice. And I know Rice sounds like the cupcake, but they beat Houston last year. Right. And so I look at that, I'm like, I think that this is really a function of how difficult Houston's schedule is. We don't meet so we can talk about like the schedule. We don't meet up this year, I should say, in football. What jumps out as, is there a scheduling difficulty? Why would the over-under be set at 4.5 if you're talking like bowl games?
The biggest reason in my head that is kind of making it an obstacle for ASU to get to the bowl games is just the fact that you've only won 3 games the last 2 years. And you look in the difference between 2022 and 2023 is staggering. 2022, you fire Herm Edwards in the middle of the season. It's a team that was really devoid of a lot of talent. They had a lot to overcome. They just weren't able to do it. Last year, you win 3 games. You easily, Parker, could have been a 7-win team last year. It's just a matter of finding a way to finish those games. They got talented this offseason. They added a lot of really, really quality kids. 2 4-stars through the recruiting class. They got a former 5-star recruit in the transfer portal from Malik Brown. They got other 4-star kids from previous recruiting classes. You lose Jaden Rashada, you lose Elijah Badger, you lose BJ Green. Arguably the 3 best players on the team. But you added so much talent to the rest of the roster that you should be able to remain as competitive as you were last year. You just got to find a way to be able to close those games. The biggest test here for ASU, you need to find 1 or 2 staple wins this year in the Big 12. The first one that comes to mind is Texas Tech. It's your first game there. Second one that comes to mind is the end of the year when you go to Tucson for the Territorial Cup against Arizona. But, I mean, there's plenty of other games on here that could be very, very important opportunities for ASU to establish themselves. But that's the biggest obstacle that you have is the previous lack of success that ASU has had is kind of contributing to to the national perspective of this program.
Well, and it's interesting too because you mentioned names like Rashad. I think people remember from the transfer portal as being a fairly big name in the transfer portal, right? You mentioned being close against Washington last year and being I think close people realize. But then you also about finishing games, and I know Houston went from a Group of 5 conference to the Power 5 conference, but finishing games has been the biggest jump, or playing complete games anyway, for Houston in my eyes. There's been games where Houston's competitive till halftime, and then the second half they just get run over because they're out of steam, right? Or there's been games where Houston kind of gets hit in the mouth by the size at the start of a game and then kind of finds ways to adjust and get up off the ropes, but it's too late throughout. That was kind of the story of the year last year. It's like, can Houston play a complete 2 halves of football against these Big 12 opponents? They kind of only did that against a couple of teams, and they beat West Virginia and Baylor as their 2 wins there. I have to say that it's probably a little bit different coming from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, right? Power 5 football to Power 4 football, and at quite the big jump. In looking at the schedule and looking at just the conference, is there anything that's daunting? That's going to be a big adjustment.
I don't know if there's anything that's really daunting in terms of making an adjustment. It's a conference that has better talent in terms of overall teams. In the Pac-12, you had Oregon, Washington, sometimes USC, and a healthy Utah, Utah.
Yeah.
Outside of that, there's a lot of parity. Big 12, there's not a singular powerhouse right now. Utah probably is that team, if any, but there's a lot of really, really quality teams here. It is a step up in competition for Arizona State, and that's going to be one of the things that they're going to have to learn quickly how to adjust to. That is, how are you going to be able to start winning more football games when you are going up against teams that are just more talented, more well coached, flat out better? This is a big first year for ASU going to the Big 12 to find a way to say, hey, we may not be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the conference, but we're in that second tier. You're looking to not be, because they're picked last. They were picked to finish last in the Big 12 preseason media poll.
Houston was second to last. We saw you there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we were buddies at the bottom. So that's poster board material. That's whiteboard material. You pin that up, you say, hey, we're not finishing 16th. That's one of the biggest goals for you, but you want to put yourself in that second tier of teams. You don't want to sit in the cellar in your first year in a brand new conference. You want to be able to establish yourself and say, hey, we're here, we're new, but get used to it.
Yeah, and I want to say that, we're both going in with quarterbacks that have transferred in, and I want to talk some about the more specific situations in a second, because I think they're actually fairly similar. So we're both at the bottom of the conference, both have that whiteboard material. Houston is in the second year with a first-year head coach. Willie Fritz comes from Tulane, right? Has pretty good resume from Tulane, et cetera, right? Arizona State is in their first year in the conference with a second-year head coach, so just flip-flopped. Kyle Dillingham comes after having been a coordinator at, Auburn, Florida State, Oregon. Pretty good background as well. Michigan State quarterback Sam Leavitt transferred to Arizona State. I don't know what your take is on him, but he looks like the starter. Houston's got second-year returning starter Donovan Smith, who had a kind of up and down first year at Houston, did have a labrum injury, transferred from Texas Tech. I see these as very similar situations. The biggest difference, frankly, being that I think Willie Fritz is almost twice as old as, or maybe just over twice as old as Kenny Dillingham. I probably have said Kyle at some point. I don't know why I keep saying that. But Richie, what on the field are you looking for? I mean, yes, wins, bowl games, but what are they going to look like between the lines?
you're a team that's just much more well coached under Kenny Dillingham. There's discipline that's been established. They live by the mentality of do your 111. So it doesn't matter what position you are. You could be an offensive guard. You could be the number one wide receiver. You need to do your job. You need to do your 111 for this team to be able to have success. And Kenny Dillingham is establishing that culture. You saw it last year. These guys are trusting each other. They're trusting themselves. They're finding ways to be able to play above their talent level. Like, I know a lot of people look at this team and they go, wow, that's a lot of 3-stars. There's not a lot of premium players. Like, it's not the easiest thing in the world to be able to do that, but you're able to overcome that kind of stuff and that kind of deficiency compared to other teams that do consistently recruit 4 and 5-star kids by having guys that are bought into the mentality. And Kenny Dillingham is establishing that mentality for this team right now.
Well, and so you've got identity being established. I think the biggest thing Houston fans are noticing is this idea of culture under Willie Fritz, right? Recruit, retain, develop is kind of his tagline. They're building up. His big recruiting thing was he's not going anywhere he has to fly. He's driving in the Houston area, getting over to Louisiana some. Like that. That's his big. He's like, hey, everyone should be able to drive home. He feels that confident in the base there in and around Houston. The culture is a big piece of this. I feel confident in what Fritz has done at Houston and what he's started. I do think the first year with the process being get the right guys get the guys off the bus that shouldn't be there, get the right guys on the bus that need to be there, and then get the guys in the right seats on the bus to kind of get things going. We're in the first step that we're getting guys off the bus, getting guys on the bus. Y'all are kind of in step 2, right? Or somewhere around that.
Hopefully.
Willie Fritz, again, in his 70s, is an older school kind of guy. As a young guy, I think I just pull up that Dillingham's 34, so he's like not much older than I am, which makes me feel very insignificant all of a sudden. What kind of culture is it that he's bringing in?
It's a culture of accountability. This is a guy that even at 34 years old, the youngest coach in college football, even with the youth that he has, he commands the respect of this team. He's not here to be your buddy, your best friend. He's here to be your head coach. And there's going to be those opportunities where he's going to be a mentor for you. He's going to be somebody that sits down and plays Madden with you or plays ping pong with you or whatever to establish that chemistry and that friendship between you. But he's also somebody that's going to be able to come in and say, hey, at the end of the day, I'm your head coach. I'm the person that you need to follow orders from, respect, and be able to establish your own integrity with this team. I'm going to be the one that is going to establish that. He's wise beyond his years, is the way that we look at it here in the desert. Like 34 years old, you could tell me he's 54 years old and been coaching for 20, 30 years, and you would believe you'd believe it. He's somebody that really understands what it means to command that respect. And he's been under several very good head coaches. At Florida State, he was with Mike Norvell. At Oregon, he was with Dan Lanning. He's been able to develop his own style of coaching under 2 guys that are very impressive when it comes to that kind of culture building for himself. So wise beyond his years.
Well, and it's just fascinating. So again, like I'm for full disclosure, I'm 33 and my day job is I teach and I am an assistant basketball coach, right? Like the idea that someone, roughly a year older than me is legitimately at the top of this profession is kind of nuts, but it also speaks to, like you're saying, like a determination, a learning from the best, et cetera, across the board here. Big 12 media days is in the past. The football season's on the horizon. Obviously, we're going to let you talk about what kind of content you got coming out of Arizona State as well. But what are an outsider, a Houstonian, a Houston Cougar fan, what should they look for when they look for the Arizona State Sun Devils? Because we're not actually going to see you in the football field this year. What are they looking at?
You're going to be looking at a team that, like I said, they're interested in playing above their talent level. So they may not yield a team that's got All-American players or All-Conference players or even guys that are going to the pros in the future. But you're going to have a team that is going to sit there with a dog mentality, an effort from this team to be the best on the field. They don't want to be the most talented team. They don't want to be the team that you come into the year and you go, wow, yeah, those 5 or 6 guys look like first round picks or All-American players. We want them, of course, but you want guys that have an attitude and a confidence to be able to play above their listed level of talent for this team. So ASU is just looking to be a football team that is ahead of where they have been the last 2 years. The biggest thing, like I said, you're hoping that this team has figured out how to win football games, how to close games.
I feel kind of like the same thing with like Houston trying to like finish games, play complete games, and the big thing here being that effort piece, never quitting piece. You know, a lot of transfers. I talk about people leaving. There are a lot of people that came in. A handful of people like Keith Cooper came in from Tulane with Willie. Tulane obviously had been fairly successful the last couple of years, knocked up USC a couple of years ago, played competitively with Ole Miss in the regular season last year. Latrell McCutcheon comes in. He was a transfer originally from, I guess he was followed Riley. So he was at Oklahoma and then USC, and now he's coming back to Texas. You know, a handful of these guys that I think are the right mentality type of guys. I mean, Keith Cooper, I mentioned the lineman from Tulane. He is fun to watch if you like line play. I worry that there aren't, you know, it is a roster in flux. It is a first-year head coach at this new program. How many of them there are, and I want Houston Cougar fans to be realistic. Like, there will be non-quantitative or there will be qualitative ways to look at success this season, right? I don't think that I think we're going to beat the 3.5 win mark or whatever, but I don't think I'm that worried about that. But I do think that there's going to be successes that aren't in those wins and losses because it's moving the thing forward. Similar, different, Arizona State?
Very similar. Very, very similar.
Again, Locked On Cougs, Locked On Sun Devils crossover. We both have the same hand sign. We didn't talk about that, actually.
Which I think is hilarious. I thought about that when we first moved to the Big 12. I thought that was really interesting. Educate me, though. Why do you guys do it? For us, it's a pitchfork. Like, that's the trident for ASU.
There's a story, Houston Cougar folklore of the Houston Cougars are traveling to Austin to play UT back in the Southwest Conference days. Cougar loses a finger in the cage or whatever as it's trying like along the drive because it's bouncing around and right. And the Texas fans are making fun of it because the Cougar can't whatever. And then Houston wins big time and starts showing off, and it's just kind of been the thing ever since.
Yeah.
And so that's the marker there. I get the pitchfork reference. I just think it is pretty funny that they're the exact same.
You said it was Texas that did that?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect.
It was.
So here's a little horns down for everybody. Yeah. Horns down to the day I die, baby.
That's one we can all agree on, I think. That's one we can all agree on. Thank you again for doing this. It's always good to introduce folks back and forth here. Locked On Cougs and Locked On Sun Devils are both primers of Locked On Podcast Network. For a second listen more on the conference and things like that, recommending Locked On Big 12. Drake's doing a great job over there explaining conference realignment, previewing the football season, etc. So go check him out. Also, make sure you check out one another. We are not competing this year in football. You can be a fan of both. It's okay. It really is.
Same hand sign and everything. It's not hard to be able to pick that up, guys.
Exactly. Exact same hand sign. Thanks again for coming on, Rich.
Yeah, absolutely. And for my ASU guys, too. Let's go Coogs.
There you go.